Today I want to talk to you guys about one of my favorite plants that takes very little maintenance. Surprisingly, I heard this plant is really tough to take care of, but it's very low maintenance for me. As long as I give it what it wants, it's happy. It won't die on me. So hopefully I can keep making it happy. But the plant that you're looking at today is the peace lily, specifically the variegated peace lily. Take a look. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about a plant that really caught me off guard. I thought that this plant was going to be a lot harder to take care of. There's a lot of stigma online about how dramatic peace lilies are, which they're not entirely wrong. This plant is very dramatic. However, that can be used to your advantage. And let me tell you why. Okay, so I have good news for everybody. Lilies in general are very toxic for pets. They can cause a lot of damage to the pet and even death. However, not to worry, because the peace lily is technically not a lily. It's still toxic to pets and human consumption, so don't try biting it, as tempting as a leaf foliage may look. But it will cause irritation and uncomfortableness, whatever that word is, for humans and animals. It won't kill them, but don't try to make a buffet out of it. So yeah, peace lilies are not actually lilies, and they do have beautiful blooms that kind of resemble a lily. So I'll show you guys real quick what it looks like. Mine doesn't have any, so don't try looking for one on this one. Eventually it will. So I have had this peace lily for about 6 months. I have been growing plants for about a year-ish. And it's safe to say that this peace lily has been around for about half of my plant life, if that makes sense. But I originally had a much bigger peace lily, and I decided to split it into 3 different plants. The first one I gave to my mom, the second is on the floor waiting for me, and this one is the biggest one that I have. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you guys about the variegated peace lily. The variegated peace lily requires a little more maintenance than the standard peace lily, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, if you do not prefer the variegated peace lily, by all means, if you get the normal one, or there's a mint one, I believe, if you guys like the mint variety. I'm not entirely sure if there's any other variation to them, but I think that the alba one is the prettiest one. So before we start talking about the blooms and the care and everything like that, I do want to mention one thing. The peace lily will not bloom all the time. It may bloom, and depending on how many plants are inside your pot, it might bloom more often than not. However, that's not the case for all peace lilies. The peace lily I've had for 6 months. Whenever I bought it, it was blooming, but ever since then, it has not bloomed. As soon as I took it home, the blooms died off. It was kind of in shock, and it was like, oh shit, let me cut it off, and it hasn't shown up since. But I do hope that it will show up in the long run, but I want you to think about that. If blooms are all you're looking for and you're not necessarily the most patient person, this may not be the plant for you. However, if you are enjoying blooming and you do like nice foliage, this plant, specifically the variegated version, does have nice foliage. So I would recommend this to you if you like nice foliage before you like nice blooms. And just think of the blooms as a nice little bonus. Or if you are patient, then wait for the blooms. And yeah, so typically the peace lily is known for how dramatic it can be. When it's thirsty, it droops down and looks like it's dead. Whenever it's not getting enough sunlight, it's just over dramatic, or enough humidity, the leaves tips will crisp up, and that's perfectly normal. I, however, don't think it's a hard houseplant to have. Maybe my house has the best conditions for it, or maybe I just neglect it enough to where it can do its own thing, but to a point. There are 3 important factors when it comes to taking care of a peace lily, and the 3 things are light, humidity, and water. So when it comes to light is very important. However, it's not as important as other plants. A lot of plants require a lot of light or very little light. Luckily, the peace lily requires moderate to bright indirect light. And what that means is, with bright indirect light, is you try to keep it in front of a window facing towards the sun or the light source. You want it to be filtered light. Direct sun is whenever the sun is shining directly down and it's fully exposed to the UV rays and all that crap. But when it comes to the Peace Lily, it can tolerate moderate light, which is not a lot, but I would suggest giving it bright indirect light. Try to keep it close to a window, and that'll encourage more leaves and more eventually flowers. Let's talk about how to measure light. And if you're curious, like, I don't have one of those light meters, I don't have this and that. Well, don't fret, because there's an easy solution. And there's an app on your phone, right? And it's called Lux. And if you download the app Lux, it can tell you what foot candle reading you have. And when it comes to Peace Lilies, you want to get at least 200 foot candles so you can walk around, face this screen towards the light source, and see how much light you're getting. If it's too little, look somewhere else. And if it's like around 100 or something like that, and you really just can't find it, then it's okay. It'll do. It might not thrive, but it'll survive. Humidity is very important when it comes to the Peace Lily. I like to keep my place somewhat humid, and I live in Florida, so Florida is already a humid place. But with this winter weather and all that going on, even in Florida, I have to use a humidifier occasionally, especially with how dry the air has been. So with the air being dry, and as dry as it is, my leaves have been getting black tips. And all that means is that the Peace Lily is asking for more humidity. That doesn't mean that your plant is sick or your plant is dying or anything. It just means that it needs more humidity. So that's it. And if you need more humidity, I would highly recommend a humidifier. You don't need anything fancy. I literally went to like Goodwill and found like a $4 humidifier that works perfect. You don't need anything crazy from like Temu or anything. Just go out, find a used one, and it'll work just fine. All right, now let's talk about water. So when it comes to the Peace Lily and plants in general, we have to worry about the watering schedule. And when it comes to the watering schedule, you shouldn't have a schedule when it comes to watering your plants. However, I'm not going to try to talk you into saying, hey, you're on a schedule, get the hell out of here. No, I'm just making a recommendation. Whenever it comes to Peace Lilies or plants in general, you generally want to use your finger or find a way to measure the moisture in the plant. So what I like to do whenever I check for moisture is I like to use my finger. People use chopsticks, people use moisture meters. I use my finger. I am a classic man. I'm old. So what I like to do is I like to get my index finger or whatever finger's available, and I like to poke my finger into the dirt. I like to poke it in about 2 inches deep, and just to see how much moisture it has. So let me do that real quick. I have watered it recently, so I know for sure that it doesn't need to be watered. So let me dip my finger in. Okay, so I've dipped it in, right? And if you look at my finger, I'm not sure how well you can see it. There's dirt everywhere. So there's dirt sticking to it. I can kind of feel the moisture on my finger. So I know that this plant does not need to be watered anytime soon. So what I do is I just leave it by the window, ignore it, let it get its sun, and it's a happy boy. I'll check it every couple of days, dip my finger in, and if it's starting to dry up, if the top layer starts feeling dry, then that's when I water it. Peace lilies tend to love to be moist. At least from my experience, they love some moisture in them. However, that doesn't mean keep it wet all the time. Whenever you're watering a plant, overwatering is caused from consistent moisture. So if you're watering your plant like every day or every other day, that's not going to give your roots enough time to breathe. So what I recommend is wait till the top starts drying off, and when the top starts drying off, that's when you water the plant. And you want to water it fully. I mean fully, thoroughly. You circle the pot around while you're pouring the water in, you're lifting it up, making sure the water is seeping out the bottom. And if the water is not seeping out of the bottom, it's not ready. Give it more water. And if it is seeping out of the bottom, congratulations, you have watered your peace lily. And finally, before I give you guys my final thoughts, I want to tell you guys how to propagate a peace lily. So a peace lily has something called a rhizome. And what a rhizome is, you got to think of it as like a little potato, and that little potato is producing these stalks or stems to grow leaves and grow these beautiful flowers. So without the rhizome, we cannot have more plants. So unlike typical aroids like monstera or philodendrons, which have nodes, we need to propagate through the rhizome. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to do that today. So I'm not gonna do it with this one because this is my big boy. I'm gonna use it on my baby one that has about 3 separate plants inside it. And I'm gonna separate it and show you guys how to do it. I highly encourage you, if you do decide to propagate peace lily, make sure you wear gloves. Even if it comes with cutting your peace lily, trimming it down, wear gloves because it is toxic, and getting some kind of their juices or whatever you want to call it on your skin. It might irritate your skin, so I would highly advise you to just wear gloves. Do that, call it a day. Nice and easy. It'll save you trouble in the future. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this peace lily back, and before that, I wanna give you guys some final thoughts. So overall, it's very difficult for me to kind of like break down a peace lily and tell you like what's wrong with it or anything like that, because other than watering it whenever it needs watered, I barely ever pay any attention to it. Yeah, sometimes I need to wipe off the dust from the leaves because it literally just sits in its corner and just grows leaves. I really have no complaints for this plant. Like whenever it starts drooping, that means that this plant is very thirsty, and whenever it's very thirsty, that means that it has no water left in its system. And normally the rhizome that we talked about is what keeps the moisture somewhat as like a little reserve. And if it's completely out, it's gonna start drooping. And okay, let's talk about something. So peace lilies get a lot of stigma for being very dramatic, and that's not a bad thing in my opinion, because whenever they start drooping, they're telling you something, and other plants don't do it as well. Peace lilies are very dramatic. They'll tell you what something's wrong with them, and that's the perfect time for you to go and take a look. Is it pests? Is it water? Is it something else? Let's find out. But this one isn't drooping, so we can't find out. But when it comes to peace lilies, when it's drooping, it's typically a water deficiency. It probably needs water. So I would do the finger test, check to see if it needs water, and if that's the issue, I'll go ahead and water it deeply. However, if there aren't any issues with water, it's constantly staying moist, it might be overwatered, which might not be the case, but it doesn't hurt to check, and the best way to do that would be by checking the roots. If the roots look healthy, then it might not necessarily be an overwatering issue. Now, if it is drooping, I would suggest also while you're doing this, even when you're watering it, I like to check the leaves. I like to look underneath the leaves and check to see if there are any speckles or anything like that that I need to look out for. If I look underneath the leaves and I see something out of the ordinary, then I'm going to separate this plant and treat it how I need to treat it for pests. But I haven't had any issues with this plant. I highly recommend it if your cats and dogs aren't like savages and trying to bite every plant that you have. If you do have pets and you do like this plant, keep it somewhere high, somewhere where the pets can't reach it. Maybe in your room where if the pets don't come in there. But I really do enjoy this plant. It brings me joy and it is beautiful. And eventually it'll bloom. And whenever it's ready, I'm ready. So yeah, this is the peace lily. And now I'm gonna go ahead and tear it apart. I'm gonna prop one. All right, I'm gonna go put this back. All right, so I have brought my little baby peace lily. Here it is. Now I'm gonna show you guys how to prop it. I'm gonna move my camera closer and probably like an above view so you guys can see it a little better. But please, if you do plan on messing with your peace lily or cutting leaves or anything like that, please wear gloves because you don't want to feel irritated or anything like that. I'm already irritated, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm going to show you guys how to go ahead and get this peace lily ready for propagation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this whole plant out before I do this top-down view or whatever it is I'm going to do. So I'm going to pull it out. I'm gonna push it sideways. I'm gonna squeeze the dirt a little bit, kind of disturb it, so whenever I pull the plant out, it'll be easier to pull out. All right. Oop, I'm dropping dirt. Okay, so I have pulled out the plant. I just made a mess, but hopefully I can clean it up if my wife gets home. She'll kill me otherwise. And actually, so like I said, I've had this plant for 6 months, and I was still learning at the time, and I put it in a pot that's way too big. Like, this is a little too big. I might try to put it in a smaller pot maybe. We'll see what happens. All right, let me move the camera closer for you guys so you guys can get a better view. So the roots look okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and do something called propagation by division. So when it comes to propagation by division, we need to separate these stalks. So as you can see, there's one plant here, and one plant here. They're all kind of grouped together. So you kind of have to like tussle with it a little bit. Mine is gonna be a little easier just because I split it a couple months ago and they kind of became their own plants. But they'll eventually grow roots and everything like that. And you just have to like separate it. That's a little too easy if you ask me. But yeah, they have like little rhizomes underneath. Let's see if I can get a good view of them. And by little potatoes, they're not actually potatoes. They're kind of like these white little like stalks underneath down here. All right. So if I try to separate this again, let's see what happens. Okay, it just decides to separate on its own. But yeah, normally there might be some pressure. You can like snap it off or cut them yourself. Yeah, nice and easy. So I now have 3 separate peace lilies that I can just do whatever I want with. I can either sell it, I can give it away, or I can just put them all together again. But in this case, I'm probably just gonna separate them into 3 separate plants, give one to one of my friends, maybe give another one to one of my other friends, and then I don't know what I'm gonna do with the 3rd one, probably give it away. But yeah, peace lilies are super easy, barely an inconvenience. So the roots look okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and do something called propagation by division. So when it comes to propagation by division, we need to separate these stalks. So as you can see, there's one plant here, and one plant here. They're all kind of grouped together. So you kind of have to like tussle with it a little bit. Mine is gonna be a little easier just because I split it a couple months ago and they kind of became their own plants. But they'll eventually grow roots and everything like that. And you just have to like separate it. That's a little too easy if you ask me. But yeah, they have like little rhizomes underneath. Let's see if I can get a good view of them. And by little potatoes, they're not actually potatoes. They're kind of like these white little like stalks underneath down here. All right. So if I try to separate this again, let's see what happens. Okay, it just decides to separate on its own. But yeah, normally there might be some pressure. You can like snap it off or cut them yourself. Yeah, nice and easy. So I now have 3 separate peace lilies that I can just do whatever I want with. I can either sell it, I can give it away, or I can just put them all together again. But in this case, I'm probably just gonna separate them into 3 separate plants, give one to one of my friends, maybe give another one to one of my other friends, and then I don't know what I'm gonna do with the 3rd one, probably give it away. But yeah, peace lilies are super easy, barely an inconvenience. Let's see if there's anything else that's interesting that I can include. Peace lilies are aroids. So remember when I said that they're not actual lilies or true lilies, they're actually tropical houseplants. So similar to a monstera or a philodendron, or however you say it, they like somewhat of a chunky soil mix, but they also like some water retention so that way they can stay somewhat moist. So I would recommend some perlite, maybe like 1 part perlite, 1 part orchid bark, and 2 parts potting soil, just so that way the perlite and orchid bark can be used as an air pocket for the plant to be able to breathe, and the soil will be able to retain moisture. So yeah, we have split it into 3 different plants, and whenever you put it into whatever mix you want, you just pot it up and you're done. I guess I can do that real quick just because I got nothing else to do. So I'll go grab some pots. All right, so I brought some pots. For plants in general, you typically want a pot that is about an inch or two bigger than the root ball. And these are the smallest ones I kind of have right now. So let's see. This is the root ball and this is the size. So if I push this in, it has plenty of room to still grow while also not being too big. So this will give it enough room to become root bound eventually and to let it grow bigger before having to repot it. So here's 1, 2, and 3. Oh gosh, this one has a bigger root ball. All right, I'm gonna switch this one with this one. Come on, boy, get in there. All right, this one's nice and good in there. That's like a perfect size for it. And then I have this one. And this one I'll just shove in there. And then after this, I would put the soil mixture. I like to put the plant in first because I like to make sure that the roots reach the bottom before putting in the mixture. The reason why is because you want the roots to be able to breathe. And if they don't reach the bottom, then they're going to be searching for the bottom and they're going to constantly be struggling for air and, a way to breathe. So next, I'm just going to fill it back up. I'm holding this plant up by the stalk down here just to make sure that the rhizome gets put into the dirt and this part just stays above the dirt. I don't want the plant to be fully sunk into the soil mixture that I'm making. Yeah, that's it. One has been potted up. You give it some nice water it all the way through, and in a couple of days or however long, it'll get used to the new potting mix and the roots will latch onto the soil that's in here. So it won't be as wobbly or anything like that. All right, and that's it. We have propagated our peace lilies. And that's all it takes to get your peace lilies ready to go. And like I said, you just want to water it after that, water it deeply, put it by a window, and that's it. You water it every once in a while when the top feels dry, and you're done. That's it. Get yourself a peace lily, okay? If you want to. I'm not going to talk you into it. But yeah, I'm Broke Botanist. I hope you enjoyed watching, and follow me.